Hey nerds, welcome back to the podcast. It's your old pal Larry Brantley inviting you to settle in and get ready to listen to the second part of our two-part conversation on all things 80s tech. We are going to talk about some of our favorite gadgetry from the 80s back when we were kids. Oh, such a long time ago. But we also tend to go off the rails a little bit in the second part of the conversation, as we tend to do when the whiskey is good. We're going to talk about NES. We're going to talk about Dragon's Lair and Leisure Suit Larry, mixtapes. We're going to talk about that time Brent got into calligraphy, and of course, the adventure of Micah finding a stereo. All of that and more on the second part of our two-parter of all things 80s tech. So, hope you're going to enjoy this one as much as we enjoyed making it. Grab a stogie, grab some whiskey, and enjoy this week's episode of Nerd Herfers. I remember my first Sony Walkman.
Yep.
I remember how liberating it was. Now, I had a boombox, but it was my home stereo in my room. I had a boombox on my windowsill. I had a turntable on the floor of my bedroom, along with my record collection. But the first time I got that Sony, and I could walk around and listen to my music and shut the world out.
Oh, yeah.
Which I've been doing in one form or another ever since.
Oh, I love it.
That was his gateway drug.
You know,
when I
there's another
lived in
person.
New York in 2000, I had my Sony Discman
Oh, yes.
Yep.
right before the iPod revolution.
Right.
But it had the anti-shock, so it only skipped a half dozen times
Yes.
on the subway. But, you know, the problem with the Sony Discman, also with the Walkman, was you either had to make yourself a mixtape or a mix CD,
Yep.
or you had to find a way to carry a bunch of that shit with you if you got bored of the one disc you were listening
Well, which,
to.
by the way, the CDR was also something that came out in the 80s.
Yeah.
First recordable CDs.
Yep.
So you can make those.
You know who else made the boombox incredibly popular in the late 80s? John Cusack in Say Anything.
Oh, yeah.
Say anything.
Yep.
Which, incidentally, I just introduced my my daughter to Say Anything for the first time. And she was just looking at it, because I can tell that both of my girls, after they started getting a little bit older, they were, they're really done with dad's movies. And I'm like, but you have to see this. You have to understand. You have to feel.
Yeah.
And so I showed that, and she had her arms folded, and a smile on her face, and I'm like, so? And she goes, it was really good.
Well, my daughter discovered John Cusack, two films, High Fidelity and Gross Point Blank.
Definitely great ones.
And not in the 80s, but she was like, oh my God, Dad, do you know about this guy, John Cusack? And I'm like, you need to see a little movie called Better Off Dead.
And I See You and Raise You, that is what I showed my girls
$2.
very first. That is the first John Cusack movie that I ever showed them. And you know what's funny is that as I continued to watch Better Off Dead, enjoying it for what it was, I don't know why, but for many, many years, it didn't really occur to me that whole movie was about suicide.
I mean, it's in the title.
It is, but if you think about
Oh my God.
logically, yes, but as you go through and you see all these funny moments, I'm sitting there watching it with the kids, and I'm like, oh my gosh, he is really trying to off himself in every way.
If you are talking about a quintessential 80s actor in John Cusack, then you also have to talk about a little movie he did called One Crazy Summer.
Oh yes,
With
Demi Moore.
Bobcat Goldthwait.
Yep.
Yes, and Demi Moore.
And Demi Moore.
Now, John
She got me through a lot of rough times. I'm just going to say that right now.
John had a pretty good intro in some of the earlier stuff. He was in 16 Candles,
Yes.
and so
Yeah.
was his sister Joan.
He was one of the geeks in 16
Yes.
Candles, yeah. Hey, real quick, second, third. I think we're all there. I think Larry has gotten a little ahead of us now, actually.
Mm-hmm.
See, I slowed down on purpose because I always smoke it too fast.
I actually did too, because
And now Larry's gotten ahead of us.
being the double pumper that I am,
Right.
I'm getting a lot of that hay. It's more complicated than hay. There's an earthiness to it. What the French talking about wine would call terre noire. And I have a feeling that is the Honduran tobacco for me, because when I smoke a cigar that is predominantly Honduran, that is what I get a lot of. You can taste the soil that it was grown in. You can almost taste like the sunlight
on the tobacco leaves. You know.
So romantic.
Oh
Yeah.
well, thank you.
I've got a
Appreciate it.
tiny bit of blackberry going on with the chocolate.
Ooh, blackberry.
My milk chocolate has turned into malted chocolate.
Oh,
I mean, it is so creamy. Now.
Whoppers.
It's crazy. Yeah, it's so creamy now. So good.
well, I can only suggest, boys, that if you're in the second third and you're enjoying it, take a hit on your cigar, and then drink a little bit of that scotch
Oh,
because
yeah.
oh my goodness,
Yeah.
Never forget.
so good. There was another gadget that I had in the 80s that was very similar to Simon, but it was called Merlin. Do you remember that?
Yep. It was the long one.
It was.
Yeah.
I had a Merlin.
Yep. I had a Merlin.
I also had a Mattel NFL football handheld game. Do you remember those?
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
It
Oh,
was
yeah.
just like 4 dots,
Yes.
Yeah.
and you would just
And,
like
then they came out with basketball, and you're like, wait, this is the same game.
same thing.
And then they came out with soccer, and you're like, wait, this is the same game.
but the packaging was different.
Right. The colors, the color on the.
I was like, if this was a
Plastic
true
was different.
soccer game, then you
Yeah.
know you'd have yellow cards and red cards, and
Yeah.
you'd throw one of your dots out
Yep.
for no good
Wait,
reason.
if this is soccer, why do they still have blockers? Why is this guy?
Also, if I can make a recommendation, I just put a little bit of the end of my cigar in the scotch just for a little bit of cross draw.
Okay, Arnold Schwarzenegger, we're
Yeah,
not
right.
going to do that.
He does tequila, doesn't he? I think.
He does do tequila. To each his own.
Hey, if that's the way he enjoys it, who are we to
That's
tell
what
him?
I just said.
Yeah, don't be vegan about it.
Don't be vegan about it.
I also want to talk about the original NES,
Yep.
the very first NES, and I remember
And say it for what it was. The Nintendo Entertainment System.
Yes, and I have a rug, like a small doormat, in my garage of the
Well, is it a
controller.
rug or a doormat?
Yeah.
Because they're very
Apologies.
different things.
Apologies, not rug, doormat.
Okay.
In my garage of the NES controller.
Oh, nice.
I have this car. It's kind of like a motorcycle.
I'm sorry. It's a motorcycle.
I meant to say motorcycle.
It's got 2 wheels and handlebars. It's a motorcycle.
Well, one
and
of the
there's
things
an
that
engine.
I really wanted to say that I appreciated about this because for the Atari 2600, and I want to come back to it for a second, but the Atari 2600 had a variety of games, right? But what it was released with was combat, and you couldn't play it with by yourself.
Right.
So you had to get other games to go along with it. And one of the games that I had on there was because they had the interchangeable paddles, right? You didn't have to just have the joystick. They had paddles where you hold on to it. It had a rotating
Yep.
Yes.
and a button on the thumb.
Yep.
And I had a game called TaxScan. I don't know if anybody knows of this one, but it's basically you have 5 ships, 2 on top, 3 on bottom, and they managed to make the stars very Galaga style, except extremely fast.
Right.
So it felt like you were moving so fast, and then the creatures that were trying to kill you were also moving along in various speeds there too. So what I used to do on purpose, making note that I said 2 on top, 3 on the bottom.
Yeah.
I would intentionally get the ships on the very left and the very right on the bottom knocked off so that it formed a V, and that was my Enterprise. So I'm firing the Enterprise. Of pew, 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 pew,
Gotcha.
pew. It's
Yeah.
so great.
Well, so again, my friend Doug was a genius at cabinet video games in the 80s, and what I learned, and there were later books published about all this. Like every video game had a book published about patterns, right? Because at that time, computing was such that that's pretty much what they ran on.
Well, they had limited memory.
Right. And
So
so
they
if
can
you
only fit
could
so much
figure
in there.
that out, then you could kick the crap out of the game every time. And so Doug did that with Williams Defender. He did it with Galaga. He did it with Pac-Man.
Yeah, Pac-Man was a big one. Yeah.
And I am not that kind of guy. Like I didn't have enough interest in going down that rabbit hole to memorize, because I would watch him get on Pac-Man and not even bother to look at the screen. He would basically just act like a blind man driving
Just muscle memory.
and just boom, boom,
Muscle
boom,
memory,
boom, boom,
or he
left,
had the
right, up,
patterns.
down, burp,
Yeah.
burp,
He had the
burp, burp.
patterns down so solid that he could just rock the whole screen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I could never do that.
I remember
that
those
was-
guys. Those guys were so annoying in the arcade because you go and you put your quarter up on the arcade, right? Because you got next game.
Yep.
And they would sit there and play off one quarter forever.
But
and
then
you couldn't leave.
Yeah.
Then a
Because if you
game
left,
came out.
Yeah.
You forfeited your next
Right.
turn.
Right.
But then a game came out that was more like a movie. Do you guys remember
Dragon
Dragon's
Slayer.
Lair?
Oh my gosh.
And followed up by Space Ace.
yeah.
I don't remember Space Ace.
Oh,
Yeah.
Space Ace was just like Dragon Slayer, except more
Dragon's
Lair.
Lair.
Dragon's Lair.
Not Dragon Slayer. That was a great movie in
You,
the
you
80s.
hear the congestion in my nose, right?
I'm sorry. Thought I was talking to a middle-aged woman.
It was his
Well,
Alabama
sometimes you
accent.
It's his Alabama
Dragon's
accent.
Lair.
Tell you about that Dragon Slayer. Y'all.
Yeah, don't you guys know what state we in? Shit.
Well, you are married to your first cousin, so yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, what I wanted to say before was that leading into games that you could play by yourself on the 2600, and of course we had to buy a bunch of extra ones, had Pac-Man, had Taxcan, had the original
Okay.
Spider-Man.
Pac-Man on the 2600 was the worst thing ever.
Oh, totally.
That was
it
a
was
horrible
awful.
game.
Absolutely awful.
I've got one of those retro 2600s.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm sitting there and I'm like, yeah, just like when I was a kid. And I started playing this game. I was like,
Not at all like when I was a
what?
kid.
We enjoyed
bullshit.
this.
Actually, I was
Yeah.
like, I suck at this.
Yeah.
My wife bought me one too
Yeah.
for Christmas, and I love it for its nostalgic purposes. And as I play it, I find out how bad I am because I'm thinking to myself, as an adult, I've got to be a little better than I was when I was a kid.
No.
So the point that I was trying to make earlier was that with the NES coming out, they gave you Super Mario Brothers. You didn't
Right.
have to have everybody else. Now, that was, of course, the dawning of broken television screens because when you got killed in Super Mario Brothers, you're always chucking the controller at the screen. And, of course, the cord was long enough so where you could actually wind up and
Oh,
throw
yeah.
it as hard as you... Yeah. So, but the other thing that I was really digging on that was a couple different games that came out afterwards. And, of course, we have to talk about Legend of Zelda.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
So to your point earlier about the boxy screens that are completely the same and like you're going from screen to screen, it's the same box. Well, Legend of Zelda gave us that with better graphics.
Yeah.
So when you got lost in the woods and
Yeah.
you had to memorize the pattern to get out of them,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
and dungeons, of course.
You just, like, that topic just reminded me of another game that my friend Doug used to play on his C64 all the time called Leisure Suit Larry.
Oh my gosh!
Yes.
I got one of my favorite jokes out of that game.
Those games were so much fun.
The one with the punchline of Liza, nobody can eat that much ice cream. And it was even better was that the booklet that came with Leisure Suit Larry had, when you went into the bar in that one scene, you always had that one guy that was telling the first part of jokes. And then they sold the booklet with one of those
The follow-ups.
the magic marker that revealed text.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
you could actually use that marker to draw on it to get the rest of the punchline. That's where I got my barrel joke. That's where I got the nobody could eat that much ice cream joke.
What I loved about
you,
that
Sierra
that
Games. Yeah.
was we
Sierra
so-
Games.
Sierra Games.
So
and then
we
they had the
King's
other
Quest.
one. Yeah, King's Quest, and then they also had the space one. What was that called? It was a guy. He was like the janitor on a spaceship. It was along the lines of Leisure Suit Larry.
I just remember that Doug would sit there in his
Quest?
dad's office
Space Quest, I think you might be right.
and play Leisure Suit Larry, and his parents never clued in to what was going on.
Yeah.
Like they had
Mine either.
they were just, oh, he's playing on his computer games again and whatever. I don't know what it's
and
called.
Anyone who's never played that, they need to know this is back with 16-bit graphics.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
These little boxy characters running around a screen. Yeah, it wasn't great graphics back then. Which reminds me, one of the big things that I was really into in the 80s and early 90s was bulletin board systems.
Yes.
Did you guys ever do that? You
I
never did
didn't,
that?
but a buddy of mine used to be on it all the time.
So for anyone that's under 45, before the internet came along, we had a piece of software you could run on your computer called a bulletin board system. And people could dial into it on their telephones, on
Yes.
their modem, and then you could change files. Yeah, you could exchange files. You could upload and download GIFs all day if you wanted to,
Gifts.
and and they had online games. You could play. It was really fun. I actually loved it so much. I actually wrote my own bulletin board software because, of course, I did. Called Streamline, and I ran a bulletin board out of my apartment at the time called Hole in the Wall. And I forgot. So back then, when people called in, you heard everything. You heard your modem connecting. You heard all the sounds, everything.
This is one of my favorite sounds ever.
I
sorry.
had to move my computer into the other room because it was in my bedroom.
Bing-bong,
Because
dong.
all night long, I know, bing bong, bing bong. I was just like, I can't sleep. But anyway,
Bing-bong,
those
bong.
so those before we had the internet, before we had email, we had bulletin board systems. So and one of the things that on there was a type of mail called quick mail. I don't know if you remember those.
Yes.
Get your quick packets. So you basically had these conversations with people, but you had to log in and you had to download your quick packet, and you would have a reader to read that. It was a form of email, and it was not instant at all. And sometimes it'd be days before you heard back from somebody, right? I mean, or a week or whatever.
So it was the electronic equivalent of snail mail.
Yes.
Exactly. It was exactly like that. And so, like, if you ever gotten like a flame war with someone, like you were insulting each other back and forth, I
You're
mean,
really calm when you came back to it.
oh my gosh, it's like, yeah, I said this, and this shut him up, and then like 3 or 4 days later, here he comes back with his retort.
That
Oh,
sounds
they
like
didn't
Reddit.
shut him up at all.
Didn't shut him up at all. Yeah. So
yeah, there
he
was a
just prolonged
text-based Star Trek game that I played off of
Yeah.
bulletin board systems once that I thought was just fantastic.
Yeah.
I know it just sounds like I'm trying to insert Star Trek into this constantly, but it's true. It's like,
No. I used to write bulletin board games. I had one called Castle Quest, and it was basically, I don't know if you remember Trade Wars 2000. You remember that 2002?
No.
It was a turn-based game where you basically were building like your space empire, and you were trading for stuff and whatnot.
Okay.
I'm doing that now, but not on a computer. That's
right.
I built one called Castle Quest, which was it was a turn-based game, and you would build your castle, and it was kind of along the lines of like Roller Coaster Tycoon and those things where you had to keep your people happy, you had to produce food, and you had to produce weapons and that kind of stuff. And then I made one called A Day at the Races, where you could pick your animal: crab, horse, dog, whatever.
Great Queen album, by the way.
Yeah.
That is true.
It is. And there was a track bookie and a loan shark. So if you ran out of money, you could go to the loan shark. Big Al, the loan shark.
Big Al. Of course, his name is Big Al.
The funny thing is the other day I was quite by accident, I was searching around the internet, and I came across a search result that said a bunch of archived bulletin board games from the 80s. I'm like, well, oh, that's kind of cool. Go back and see, because now you can run those on emulators, right?
Yeah.
And actually, my A Day at the Races game was part of that archive. And so I downloaded it, and I'm like, cool. And I loaded my emulator and stuff. And it's like, now remember back then, the highest speed we had for a long time was 2400 baud, right? Which is extremely slow. And so like so all the games were written for that speed. And so like whenever
What year was that?
I think I did this in 85 or 86.
Because I know that I had modems that were slower than that before.
Oh yeah, 1200, 300, 1200.
Yes.
And 24 was the new one.
Yep.
And then 48 came out.
And
And,
I
then
remember
9600.
14.4.
Yeah, and then 14.4 came out, and then 28.8, and then 56. and
Yep.
I just kept going. So anyway, all those games were written with that baud speed in mind. So like when you hit go on the race to start the race, it's like the guys would move and just, kind of inch across the screen a little bit and do the race and whatever. I loaded up in the emulator and I hit go, and it's like, bink. It's like you couldn't even see it. It was like it was over.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, oh yeah, clock speeds. Okay, I forgot. We've improved computers a little bit since
I
then.
remember that.
Yeah.
I remember taking various games that I had in other computers that were a lot slower, and then finding a way to transfer them from 5 1/4 to 3.5 inch floppies, and then putting them in the new computer, and it was just like,
Yep.
it's like, oh, the game's, oh
Yeah.
man,
Yeah, I wrote this game called Freddy Foo and the Fiery Fist of Fury.
yeah,
That is some great alliteration.
And it was one of those. There was this game, I forgot what it was called, but it was like a side view of two guys. It was before Street Fighter, and you would do these karate moves like roundhouse kick. Or
Was it
punch.
international karate?
No, it wasn't that. It was something else. But I used to love to play
Karate
that game.
Champ?
Maybe. Anyway,
That was the same game.
oh,
They
okay.
rebranded it.
was it?
Well,
Yes.
that's what inspired me to write that game. So, and I'm writing that game locally and testing it locally, and the guy's jumping in the air and doing his roundhouse kick and all this kind of stuff. And then I go to play it online for the first time, and it's like, blink, blink. It's like the guy's like suspended in the air as he slowly does his turn. It's so funny.
All right, let me throw this question out to you guys. If I pinned you down and said you have to pick one piece of technology from the 80s that most influenced you as a person, what would it be? And I'm going to go to Micah first.
Shit. Oh my gosh. So you just pinned me down and looking for an answer, and strangely, pro wrestling from the original NES video game popped into my head. But that's not it.
You sure?
He's got you pinned down, and he's got a little spit coming out of his mouth.
It is like getting ready to drip on me. I'm like,
Yeah.
pro wrestling. But that or Magic of Sherazade. Are we talking like technology, not video games that we played? I'm sorry.
Not necessarily video
Could
games,
be anything.
although it could be. But
All right.
so the conversation tonight has been technology of the 80s.
Yeah, I would
right?
definitely say that that it was, and I know we talked about it a bit already, but the boombox. Because I remember back, I'd have a tape in the boombox, and as you know, the fastest way to get a recording off the radio was to you press
Yes,
record,
sir.
you press pause.
Yep.
And that was the absolute fastest way to, because I remember that, what was it? Y95 was a radio station in the Dallas area, and they were always playing the pop songs of the time. And I wanted to capture them all because I wasn't buying my music, much like the Napster days. But I had like this twin bed with this kind of shelving behind it with like sliding panels that I just thought was the most awesome bed ever. And so my mother's trying to get me to buy a new bed. She's like, "You need a queen. You're getting too tall." And I'm like, "No, I like this bed." So anyway, I'm reaching up and I have my hand like above my head on the pause button. It's like 10, 11 o'clock at night, and I'm waiting for the song I want the most. And I unpause, record the song, and then pause when it's done. And the reason why is because I ended up collecting all of these various tapes with all of my favorite songs and all my favorite music. And you're essentially making playlists on the fly, which then gave birth to my love of all music.
Yep.
Yeah.
What about you, Brent?
First of all, I'm going to go back. You're correct, Larry. Micah. I'm looking at my list. 1981, the Osborne 1 came out.
Did I win?
You win.
Yes.
That's before the IBM came out. I think theirs was 86, was it? Should have known. IBM was always kind of behind the curve.
And the only reason I know that is because my stepdad at the time is the one who bought the 5150, and then shortly afterwards bought that one. I don't really know what he used it for.
You can still buy 5150s. They're on eBay. You can get them for a few $100.
No kidding.
Like fully functional.
Wow.
It's kind of cool. Mine obviously is the personal computer. I mean, that when my dad brought home that first computer, I was just dumbstruck. I turned it on. I immediately wanted to figure out how to make it bend to my will. And
love
that
that.
started my programming journey
I
right
love
then and
that.
there. I subscribed to all kinds of magazines because there wasn't really, like I was still a young kid. So it wasn't like I could just go up to the community college. And of course, computer courses didn't exist yet. Some did, but they were all around the mainframes and punch tape and punch cards and crap like that. But so there was this magazine called Byte Magazine, and they would always have this coding column in there. I don't know if that's what it was called, where they would they would have an entire program in there that you could put in. And I remember one of them was called Space Cave, and I'm like, I'm going to write this. Well, the code they released it in was binary.
So ones and O's, right?
Ones and zeros, the whole thing, and like those are impossible to debug. So after 6 months of typing ones and zeros into the computer, I had a screen come up, and a little smiley face is one of the ASCII characters on the screen, and that was it. After 6 months, I had a bunch of lines that made walls and this one little character.
Which gave birth to the technological genius that sits
Oh my
right
gosh.
there.
And it took another 6
that is
months
amazing.
to make that guy move.
right,
I want to
Larry.
take a quick break here before I give my answer to that question because we are now I think we're all in the final
Second third.
Final third.
Final third, sorry.
So let's get notes on the final third of The Last Rites by Ovea Negra. Micah, start with you.
So the dark chocolate, again, is completely consistent through the whole thing, except, and as expected, since the heat level's a little bit more, I'm getting even more toasty notes. And every time on my retrohale, every single time, it's like the toast and the chocolate and the creaminess, and then right at the very end, blackberry. And it's just a wonderful experience.
I'm glad to hear it. Brent?
My milk chocolate that turned into malted chocolate has now turned into toasted marshmallows.
So interesting that you said that, because I'm on the final third, and what I get, s'mores.
Yep.
Yeah. It sounds like we're all talking about the same thing in different words.
I agree. Yeah. Okay, so I am not someone who runs with the crowd. However, I did ask you first what yours was, and I will tell you this. As a kid in the 80s, especially in high school, I was the class clown, which meant that I was very popular with girls, but which also meant that I
Couldn't
was
get a date.
only ever friends with those girls. Until,
You're like the brother I never had.
yeah,
You know
until
what? You're not wrong.
I started making mixtapes on my boombox.
Yes.
Mm.
And I will tell you right now that one of my few talents in life has always been to put a good mixtape together for very specific individuals.
I am pointing at Larry right now in complete 100% agreement.
Because
Agreement.
I would do the same.
Agreements.
First of all, so I would make so I figured out how to, because my boombox had a double cassette on it, right? But then I also had an outlet where I could plug my stereo, my turntable, into my boombox. And so I would be enamored with a girl. I would casually find out what kind of music she liked to listen to. And then I would spend all goddamn night making her a mixtape.
You were living next door to me.
And then I would present it to her, and not every time, but a lot of times that worked like a charm.
Hell
It was
yeah.
better than a bouquet of flowers.
I'm telling
It was
you.
better than chocolates, because, and let's face it, we all know this is a scientific fact, as teenagers, girls are way more mentally developed than guys.
Oh my gosh.
And so they would actually think about, okay, he worked hard on this. It is sincere and it means something and it speaks to me. And so, yeah, for me, it was definitely music-related technology. The boombox first, later for my own personal consumption, the Sony Walkman. Because to be able to drown out the world, because I was an introvert from a very early age. I was a performer at a very early age. And a lot of people have always mistakenly believed that if you're a performer, that you're type A and you love to be around people and you love to be the center of attention. And that is just simply not true.
Nicole Kidman, Andrew McCarthy.
Yeah, so I've always told people that as a performer, you have to understand it's a one-way transference. If I'm up on a stage doing a set of stand-up comedy, I don't do crowd work. I don't interact with the crowd. If I'm in front of the camera and I'm doing a scene, if I'm on a stage and I'm doing a scene, whatever it is, if I'm behind a microphone in a recording booth, it's one way. The transference is all one way, and I prefer it that way. And so I was always an introvert. But I realized pretty early on that I could use music to express my feelings for girls
I just had
that
this
I
picture
couldn't
of-
say out
Preach.
loud.
I just had this picture of Larry walking up to a girl in his headgear, going,
Never had that.
going.
But go ahead.
I made you a mixtape.
I mixed
Yeah.
your mixtape.
Sorry, you're
You
thinking of the
listen to
wrong
my
Larry.
mixtape.
I had perfectly straight teeth when I was a kid. I never had any dental problems, but I definitely did. I would go up to a girl in class and I was like, I made you a mixtape. And invariably they would go home and they would listen to it, and then very
Fall
often,
in love with you.
very often,
Yeah.
it worked.
Yep.
So yeah, but if I'm like, the biggest thing I'm a nerd about is definitely music, and so the ability to, like, the recording off the radio, I did that all the time.
Oh, yeah.
But I did that for me, and I really used to get pissed off at DJs, because in the DJ world, you would do a thing to a song that was either called front selling or back selling. You were talking over the intro, introducing the song or talking about something, and then right as the first lyric dropped, like a half beat before, they would stop talking,
Yep.
and you're into the song.
Yep.
Or they would back sell it, basically the same thing, but at the end of the song. They used to piss me the hell off.
Oh yeah.
I can
But
build-
you couldn't get
yeah.
over it, right? Like, if
Yeah.
you wanted to record your songs on the radio, that's what you had to do. You had to deal with
I
that.
did the same thing with TV shows. Like I remember when the Star Wars Christmas special came out. I had my little shoebox cassette recorder, and it wouldn't reach the speaker of the TV. So I got a stack of books and stacked it up and put that on there. And then I was doing that, but I was doing it with the commercials, right? I was doing the pause thing you were talking about, but doing it with the commercials. And I used to record all kinds of TV shows that way. Battlestar Galactica, every single episode.
Oh, yeah.
I recorded every single episode that way.
So I can completely relate to that. I remember back, I want to say 1987. I went out to the dumpster to take the trash one night. We were living in an apartment. And next to the dumpster were 2 speakers, stood about 4 feet tall each, and a Pioneer receiver, all knobs,
my.
and a turntable.
Oh my!
I grabbed all of this stuff and took it back up to my apartment, cleaned it up, found out that it worked perfectly, with the exception of like a couple of shorts in the receiver, which I popped the case off and I worked on. I was nowhere as near technical as you were, Brent, but I mean, I was able to like figure out why things were not working the way they should, and I was fiddling with things and just kind of test driving. Anyway, so I did this, and then eventually went out and bought a dual cassette tape deck, and then that's when I went into that. To Larry's point, one Christmas, I was very heavy at the time into what they were referring to as retro music, but when in actuality it was actually referred to as new wave and punk.
Yep.
And during Christmas, my all-time favorite Christmas song of all time, was Christmas Wrapping by the Waitresses.
Oh yes.
So while I'm sitting
Yes,
there,
that is on my Christmas list, bro.
I'm happy to hear that. I am so happy.
Ding, 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 ding,
yes.
ding, 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 ding.
Very good.
Love that song.
All right,
So,
let's just do the
I'm
whole song
on
like
this.
that. Come on.
I could. So
We both could.
yes, and we will in the Christmas
might
episode.
that might be the outro music for this one, bro. I don't know. It just might be.
So I've got my fingers. I've got everything on the buttons. I've got the record down. I've got the pause, because unlike a boombox on a dual cassette tape deck, I mean, it was even more accurate. It worked even faster.
Yep.
Had the ability to record at double and triple speed.
Yep.
And you'd still get decent quality. It was really great.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I call into the radio station, and it's a Sunday morning, and they're taking requests because, DJs on Sunday morning are bored. So I'm sitting there, and I was like, hi, I was hoping that you might be able to play Christmas Wrapping by the Waitresses. He goes, are you having trouble with the one you've got? And I was stumped. I was like, I don't get this guy's joke. I was like, and then
just play the song.
He proceeds. He's like, all right, man, thank you. And he clicks it off, and I'm sitting here thinking about it because, of course, that's all pre-recorded, right?
Yep.
And I'm thinking it, and I hear the sound, ding, 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 and I'm like, shit, and I unpause it and record it, and it's my voice talking to the DJ that leads into the song.
You got on the radio.
I was so stoked, man.
You got on the radio.
I think I still have that cassette somewhere too.
I love. Okay, find it.
I will find
We'll
it.
find a way for Brent to play it on a future episode.
Definitely.
because we got to have that.
Yeah. We'll have to time travel back to the 80s and find a cassette deck I can play it on.
If anyone can do it,
Yeah.
you can.
Yeah. I could probably rig something up.
I believe in you.
I believe you can fly.
Okay.
On the wings of eagles.
Oh God.
Because you know what, Micah? You're the wind beneath my wings.
You are.
Bette Midler for the defense.
Well, I
Your
mean,
Honor.
in all fairness, talking about your romantic mixtapes there, that was a lot of work back then.
It was.
sure was.
People don't understand.
Not
It's
nearly
not like
as
you
much.
could just download a song and just mix it in
I
GarageBand
mean,
or
now
something.
you
I mean,
can
it was a
Not
lot of
nearly
work.
as much as your
Playlist.
ones and zeros, but definitely
Yeah,
some
it was a
effort.
lot of work.
Now you can create a. I mean, so think about this, listeners, as we transition to the end of this episode. Think about the work that it took to manually create a playlist, what
Yeah.
we called a mixtape, and how easy it is to do today. You go on whatever streaming service, you create the playlist, you just send it to somebody.
Right.
Yeah, it
Where's
feels.
the heart?
How lazy is
Where
that?
it is lazy.
And you know
It
what's funny is
lazy.
that today's kids, it actually has impact, and they really, really enjoy that. But I wish that they could understand the amount of effort and time, and because I would record stuff off the radio and have it on that one. and then you had your dual cassette deck.
Yeah.
And then you could actually record specific ones and arrange things exactly
I
the way
actually
you needed
went to Radio Shack, and they used to have this little. Actually, I think I still have it.
Some of y'all gonna need to Google Radio
Yeah.
Shack.
I think, and I honestly think I still have this. I think it's in a box in my closet. But they sold a little 4-channel mixer, and I would take a couple cassette decks, and I would literally blend, fade in
and out.
songs.
Yep.
Yeah,
Skills, mad
Yeah.
skills.
yeah.
You
And
were a DJ before they knew what those
that's
were.
right. Ricky, Wiki. Before
Downtown Julie Brown.
right.
Martha
I
King.
had a similar thing I did. It wasn't mixtapes. So I'm sure we all remember the most famous piece of equipment ever released in the 1980s, the Trapper Keeper.
Oh,
yeah.
definitely.
And then they had that one where it had you could slide papers and stuff in the front of it, you know, personalize it a little bit.
Yep.
So you're not going to believe this, but in middle school, I was a complete nerd.
I don't believe it.
Well,
Yeah.
no, I don't either.
And I decided I wanted to
Bullshit.
learn calligraphy. And I got into it. I bought all like my dad would take me to the art store and I would buy calligraphy pens.
Is this because you had a spirograph as a kid?
I did have a spirograph as a kid.
Hello.
I'm a calligrapher too, so I feel you.
Yeah, which a spirograph, for people that don't know, was basically these plastic circles you stuck a pen in, and it had this this other little ring, and you would just spin your pen around inside this
And
ring.
make geometric
make
shapes.
geometric
It was
and-
the best thing.
And that's what we called entertainment back then.
Yeah.
Yes.
For those, especially for those of us who didn't like math.
Right.
It's like you would do a spirograph, and then someone much wiser would go, "I think that's the Fibonacci sequence." What the hell?
But anyway, so I started off making. I think maybe this is my freshman year in high school. Actually, Motley Crue came out with their second album, and
Is that
it had,
Shout at the Devil?
Yeah, Shout the Devil, and it had that intro. Remember that intro? The one it was like the bong. The
Oh,
heavy,
yeah.
and the words and stuff.
Yep.
I wrote that in calligraphy and stuck it in my Trapper Keeper, and then all my friends saw it and go, "I want one," so I started selling them for $0.25 a piece. Right.
Nice.
And then
Just
this
a quarter?
Yeah. Well, a quarter was a lot back in the 80s.
Yeah,
right?
you didn't know how to price
That's like
shit.
that's
what
like
I-
$500 in today's money. But and then this girl goes, "That would be cool. Can you do the lyrics to this song I like?" And I'm like, "Why, of course." And then
You bet I can.
yeah, and then that was my
What are you
thing.
doing Friday?
Your stealthy way of finding out the music they like. I did the same thing, and then I would do calligraphy of the music and give it to them.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah, I never
Oh my
sold it
gosh.
to the ladies, only to the boys.
Your calligraphy.
Oh no, yeah.
You're-
Only you sell it to the boys, you give it to the ladies.
Your calligraphy story is a lot more impressive than mine. Mine was actually, I'd already been in so many art classes, and I had been working on calligraphy for years. And I remember my Spanish teacher at the time negating pretty much every test I ever had to take if I would do all the calligraphy on the certificates that he was going to put out for certificates of achievement.
And is that why you don't speak Spanish to this day?
That's why I have
But why you pass
hundreds
Spanish?
in Spanish and speak only mild amounts of Spanish, because I learned, as probably everybody here who's ever waited tables before would know, I learned all my Spanish from working in restaurants.
You learned Spanglish.
Oh no,
No.
no.
But so that's interesting that you say that because there's different kinds of Spanish.
Mhm.
So was it Mexican Spanish or Ecuadorian Spanish or Colombian Spanish?
You know,
Because depending on what restaurant you worked at and who the line cooks were,
Right.
right?
yeah. You know what? I honestly couldn't tell you. I admit that I was very insensitive, and I did not inquire into their heritage.
Ugh.
As much as I should have, Larry, I apologize, because it built up to this moment, and I failed you.
No, not at all.
If you only had the foresight when you were a kid.
I know. If I
I
just
know.
knew I was going to be talking to Larry
We
at this
only
very
had
moment.
foresight when we were children. Good Lord. I wasn't thinking past, like, is she going to like that mixtape? I don't know. Is she going to like it? I hope she likes it. I really hope so. I worked really hard on it. I hope
No,
she
but I got to
likes
tell you, the art of the mixtape was a mastercraft experience. You might as well have painted her a picture, written her a poem, made
I
a
felt
mixtape.
like Van Gogh,
and
man,
you
when
know
I was
what?
doing that
you
stuff.
You were, and that's what I'm just going to say. You were.
Yeah.
It would have been better if you would have handed her calligraphy lyrics for every song you put on the tape. But what am I?
Yeah, Larry. I mean,
yeah, I
thinking
don't.
that
I
maybe
might
don't
have
think
really
that's
wanted to
true.
up the
Actually,
game.
no, I'm gonna disagree with
I made
that.
you the mixtape, and I wrote these really pretty lyrics after you. Please love me.
Please love me.
over and over again. It just
I
says,
just
"Please
want
love
to
me,"
make
over
out
and
with
over
you.
again.
Is that
It's
so
not the
hard?
lyrics.
Oh my gosh, that's
Yeah.
so funny.
It's amazing how in the 80s, so much of my sincere effort was ultimately directed at being able to make out with a girl that I liked.
Well, we were teenagers. I mean,
Yeah.
I think our formative years were a little different. I think you're 4 years older than me, 3 or 4 years
At
older than me.
least.
And Micah, you're 3 or 4 years younger than me.
Very likely.
So,
Baby.
I mean, like I said, my formative years were the 80s, the decade of the 80s,
Definitely.
right? Yours were probably starting mid 80s or
Okay,
early
so
80s,
you
right?
could say that, but so yes, in
What year were you born, Micah?
75.
Yeah.
So go with me for just a moment. By the time 1983-84 hit, I
You're
actually
8 or
had
9.
babysitters. I had babysitters and various outside influences that said, you know, if you want to be cool, you need to listen to this tape. And they handed me Elvis Costello.
Oh, man.
And they
Yeah.
started introducing me to music that was just so formative and so insightful. I fell in love with it. So from that point on, as the years continued to go by, I just stayed in the 80s because it's a very warm and comfy place.
Yeah.
That's true.
I mean,
So true.
honestly, I honestly feel sorry for even my kids growing up, and especially kids today, because like I said, the technology is so advanced and so pervasive, it's just taken for granted. And they'll never have that complete sense of wonder and awe that we had when these technologies were coming out, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's probably my favorite part of the 80s, honestly, is just, like I said, there was always something new around the corner. You were just constantly wondering what was coming next and just in awe of whatever came out next.
I don't know.
a-
I kind of feel like that's still happening because now, here we are in the 21st century, which, by the way, remember when we used to think about how far in the future that is? And remember how many of the movies that we used to watch in the 80s took place right now
Right.
Yeah.
and
Back
are
to the future.
happening? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but I don't know. I feel like generationally speaking, I mean, you know, we are middle-aged men, and so we have developed cynicism, as all middle-aged men do. And we feel like the younger generations have no appreciation and all of that, and we grouse and we bitch and we whatever. But I do believe that that sense of awe and wonderment is part of the human condition, especially when you're young. So I feel like it's still there.
Yep.
Well,
I-
I'll revise my statement to say it's still there, but it's not in the quantity we had back then.
Well,
Because so many new
okay.
things were, like I said, the 80s were a decade that kicked off a series of technological revolutions.
Did a
and-
moth just fly into your
Yeah,
nose?
it did. Right when I said that. It was my sign. Shut up, you don't know what you're talking about. But
Moth just got Brent
yeah.
just got bitch slapped by a moth. That's what it's never happened on the show before, but yeah, first time for everything.
but I'm just saying that there was such a rush to be first to everything. Matter of fact, there's a TV show you need to watch on AMC. It's called *Halt and Catch Fire*,
Okay.
and it so authentically captures what that time period was like. It follows these guys that start their own tech company, and they're trying to beat everyone to market with like the first portable computer, the first affordable PC computer, the first portable computer, the first search engine, like as it keeps going throughout the decades. They start a search engine company. I mean, and they're always getting defeated by the big guys.
Yeah.
Like right when they're about to release. I remember there's this one where they go to a convention and they release their new portable computer. And one of the guys is an engineer, and the other guy, the guy that played, the Elf King. I can't think of names right now.
What movie?
Lord of the Rings.
Oh,
Elrond, not Elrond.
yes.
Not Elrond.
Branduil?
The long-haired blonde, the real pretty people.
Lee
Pretty-
Pace.
Lee Pace, thank you. Lee
Yeah.
Pace. He's in there as well.
You got me on that
and
one. I
he
thought
is
I was going to
the-
be able to pull that one.
He's the, the sales guy, the face of the company type thing, right? Doesn't always do everything the right way, but he gets stuff done. Anyway, but it just follows these guys throughout the decades as they just keep trying. Like they, like I said, they were trying to start their first search engine, and people don't realize that the first search engines were literally people crawling the internet and then putting these findings up on their search engine
Oh,
page.
wow.
Right.
It wasn't automated in any way. It was people doing it, right?
Was I don't know if you know the answer to this or not, but the first search engine that I can remember using was in the 90s, and it was Ask Jeeves.
I remember.
well, I mean, there was Lycos, there was Alta Vista, and Yahoo was one of them. And,
Do you know at what point it stopped being automated, or it started being
well,
automated?
that's what defeats them, right? They're still doing it manually, and then
Okay.
these new search engines come out that are automated.
Okay.
Right? So they're always just behind, right? But anyway, so they're at this convention.
Story of my life.
Yeah. They release their new computer, and it's a big hit at the convention. And then they go to this after party in this room, and this guy fires up one of the first Apples, and it goes like hello, and he's like, holy crap, it talks, you know. And that was basically the story. But anyway, it's such a good series.
I'll
it
have
is
to
a
check
great,
that out.
and it's like when I'm watching, I'm like, I remember that, I remember that, I remember that, you know.
I got a big question for you guys. All right. It's a big technological question here. You could make the argument that in the 80s, late 70s, and then through the 80s, we had a technological explosion. I mean, before that, we had technological experiences, we had them and advancements, but in the late 70s and through the early and middle 80s, there was just this huge explosion of technology that happened. What do you think happened that made technology explode so exponentially, Larry?
Microchip.
Yeah, I was exactly what I was going to say. The microchip. If you're going to talk about a game changer, it was the ability to process faster with a smaller piece of hardware. And so, the guys who and I say this as a consumer of technology, right? I'm not a software guy like Brent. I'm not deep into it as you are, Micah. But as a person sort of looking on the outside as a consumer of this technology, it's got to be the microchip. It was the ability to process, the ability to get those computations done faster than they'd ever been done before with a small little thing. And now I get that. At the time, I had no freaking idea what that was, right? Because I didn't care about it. I just liked the things I liked.
Yeah.
Right? So for me, that's as an adult looking back, that's probably what it would be.
Well, because the light bulb, for instance, I'd heard rumor before. I don't know if this is a real thing or not, but I'd heard rumor that the light bulb, for instance, that there has always been an everlasting light bulb, something that lasted in an extremely long period of time. Whether it was LED or not, I don't know, but it lasted for exceptional amounts of time. And the fact that you couldn't market something like that and constantly make money off of it, and in the process of creating something and releasing its capabilities as it was small and then incrementing on it so that you can constantly make a profit on it over the years, do you think that we had that microchip technology that could process things at a faster rate that would allow them to achieve the things that they wanted to, like, for instance, the various speeds of modems, right? Did they always have a 28.8? Did they have to do 14.4?
I will tell you, back, let's go way back to the 30s and 40s and 50s, right? Home appliances were built to last forever. I have a freezer, I have a deep freezer in my garage that's from the 1940s, and it's still going strong. It's not frost free. I have to turn it off and defrost every once in a while. But that thing just won't die.
But it's solid state.
It's solid.
It doesn't depend on microchips or electronics.
They started figuring, and if you think about this, so as that technology advanced, right? You're right. They actually do plan releases of technology so that they don't kill products they already have.
Yep.
They let those products get to their end of life before they start releasing the new ones. Basically, it's called functional obsolescence is what it is.
Yep.
Washing machines are built to last 5 to 7 years and die, right? And if it dies before that, the thing that dies is usually so expensive that it's better just to buy a new washing machine, right?
Yeah.
And that's definitely on purpose. And now you think about software. We used to buy software. Adobe Illustrator 1 comes out, right? And then next year, Adobe Illustrator 2. We go to the software store and we buy that and we install that on our computer. We upgrade our thing. Now it's all subscription based.
Yep.
Right?
Which is why I don't use them anymore.
Right, exactly. Well, I mean, it's annoying, right? Because you're like, I just want to buy this once and be able to use it, you know? But
Yeah.
no, it's like, nope, you've got to pay this monthly or yearly fee, and then, you know, and then we'll give you new stuff as it comes out.
So once they got out of the 40s and 50s and realized that, holy shit, everything that we're making is lasting.
Yeah. And
Then-
and they're not selling new stuff. That's the thing, right? I mean, you think about it back
Why
then,
are
40s and
sales
50s.
down? Well,
Well,
because-
so you think about it back then, they're releasing an appliance that not everybody has that appliance,
Yeah.
right? They've got a wide open market. And then that market gets saturated and they're like, no one's buying our stuff now because it lasts forever. Well, now they start building stuff that breaks so that you keep having to replace it.
Yeah. It sounds like cars today.
Yeah. Well, same thing with cars.
Yeah.
I mean, if you don't know how to, if you know, and cars today are made in such a way that you have to really know about cars in order to keep the maintenance up.
Oh, yeah.
you know?
Especially with the different integrated computer ports.
Yeah.
Well, this is why ultimately I want to go back to, and this is totally my middle-aged man coming out. I want to have a muscle car. And I don't know shit about cars. I'll be the first to admit that.
I can help you there.
But I want to have a car that does not depend on electronics, that runs on gas. I know that's a very unpopular thing to say. I'm of two minds about this, boys, because on the one hand, I want to be in charge of driving until I literally can't anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
It's why I watch what I eat, I work out, I do all of the things that I can because now I'm into this longevity thing. And my wife actually is the CEO of a company that is longevity medicine practice, right? So we want to be able to live for a long time and still be functional and not just, you know, sit in a corner in a puddle of our own drool.
Oh, yeah.
We want to be able to do stuff. But also, I'm ready for a fully autonomous car because I want to be able to drink while the car is driving.
I was going to say, it's funny he's sitting there talking about longevity while he's drinking scotch and smoking a cigar.
Yeah.
Well, I got to tell
I
you.
admit I'm a contradiction in terms. I fully admit that.
I got to tell you, when I was in college, I bought a 62 Nova convertible. And one of the most beautiful things about it, I walk up on it, the outside paint is just horrendous. It doesn't have any wheels. I'm not talking tires. It doesn't have wheels. It doesn't have the rag top. You know, the back seat, didn't have a back seat.
There was no backseat.
And so what I had to do is I had to go around to various places around the DFW area looking for parts for my car. And it was one of the most amazing things. And when I worked on my car, and you pop the hood, I could see all the way to the ground. I could reach in and I could influence things. I could change things. I could rebuild. I could do anything I wanted to. And now that everything is all integrated with the computer, I'm on YouTube saying, "Oh, okay, so in my daughter's 2010 Cobalt, how do I change this out?" And then when I find out that it's an
They're like,
absolute
you have to
disaster,
you have to take off all the wheels and take all the seats
Ugh.
out and then do a rain dance. And
exactly, and it's like
Buy
how do
all
I get,
these special
how do I
tools.
get to the O2 sensor? Oh yeah, step 1, remove clutch. Oh,
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I mean, my first car that I bought for myself was a 1966 Mustang, straight 6,200. I
Oof.
mean, talk about a little engine.
Yeah.
That was a cruiser. But I mean, it was not a muscle car by any means. It was definitely a cruiser. But I remember I cut my teeth on that car, right? Learning how to take care of engines and stuff.
Yeah.
And you know, it had a generator, not an alternator.
it doesn't even surprise me that you work on cars in addition to electronics.
Well, I mean,
a tinkerer is a tinkerer.
yeah, that's right.
Fair enough.
But I remember the first time I opened up that car, like you were talking about, you could see to the ground. I'm like, I could literally stand in the engine well next to this engine and still have room to move around.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it was insane how small that engine was. Yeah, but nowadays you can't do that. I mean, they're so packed with everything. And like you said, they, you know, when the O2 sensors go out, I'm like, which one of the 6 O2 sensors is it? And where's it
Exactly.
located? And it's always the one behind the engine that you can't get to.
Exactly.
You know? Not the one in the front that's right there that you can reach. It's the one that you have to take half the engine out to get to it. Here, I'll take some of that.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. That is really good scotch, by the way.
Ain't it?
You know, that reminds me of a story. When I was moving here to where I live now, I'm not going to say the city because I know we're trying to avoid stalkers because
Hell yeah, we're so popular.
we're so worried about stalkers.
That's true. I mean, we have like guards on the outside of the gate over here to keep people from coming in while we record.
That's right.
Hey, they are private contractors.
That's right.
And they are fully licensed to carry the weapons that they are carrying.
They are.
It says BlackRock on their jacket or something. Like that?
Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Just be thankful for the security, Brent.
That's right.
Yeah, Larry paid for it.
So anyway, my now wife bought me this nice for my birthday. It was his birthday or Christmas or something. She bought me a nice bottle of Johnny Walker Blue. Right?
I'm a fan.
Yeah, I actually really like the blue. I'm like you. I grew up on the black and reds, but always
Thank you.
always
Somebody
mixed.
else here admitted it.
but always mixed. Like I didn't
It
drink.
only took 2 episodes.
I didn't drink those straight, and I shouldn't have said grew up on because my parents weren't feeding me whiskey every day.
Then you did not have good parents.
Yeah, I was
my
gonna
friend.
say, like when I was sick, my parents would actually when I was sick, they would make tea and then they would pour like a shot of Jack
Oh
in
no!
it and say, "Here you
my
go."
my grandparents were all about
Slam
the hot,
that and
my,
then go
my
to bed.
grandparents were all about the hot toddy.
Oh yeah.
Whiskey and lemon. You got a sore throat? Whiskey and lemon.
Yep.
I'm like, yeah, because the first thing you want to put on a raw red throat is alcohol.
And your baby's teething?
Yeah.
Whiskey on the gums.
That's
Yeah,
right.
oh yeah. Yeah.
Now they'd call CPS on you, of course. But anyway, so she bought me this nice bottle of Johnny Walker Blue. We cracked it open. We had a couple drams of it, didn't have a lot gone. And I was in the process of moving out here. And the place I was living at the time had very limited parking. So everyone's always fighting for parking. So I'm loading up my apartment. I'm on the last load of my apartment. I left that box of Johnny Walker Blue on the counter to be the
What?
last thing. No, hold on. To be the last thing I took out, right? Because I
Okay.
wanted it with me in the car. So as I'm leaving, I grab that box and I take it down with me. And there's a guy waiting for my parking spot. And I'm like, okay, let me get out of here. So I get out of here. I get all the way here and I'm like, oh no, I don't have that Johnny Walker Blue with me in the car like I thought. And then, regretfully, I remembered I had to put one last thing in the back of my car, so I set that box on the rear bumper.
Oh.
And this is where ADHD
You're gonna
kicks
make me
in.
cry.
Yeah, this is where the ADHD really sucks. I set that box down on the bumper, completed my task, put the thing in the trunk, and then my brain says, okay, you're done. You can move on to the next thing. Without reminding me to pick that box up. So somewhere between here and Mansfield, someone got a really nice box of Johnny Walker Blue.
On my cut when I ride, I actually took the string with the little Johnny Walker logo off of the Johnny Walker Blue bottle and laced it through my pocket
Nice.
so that I'm always riding with it.
So you got street cred.
Hell yeah.
People roll up on you and they're like, they see that string and they're like, oh, back off.
They're
man.
like,
That's
oh,
right.
don't mess with that
This
guy.
dude's like one level below the Punisher.
Or
Well, I don't know about you guys, but I'm ready to go to after hours now because I have a second cigar,
I do too.
and I just kind of feel
I'll
like
go
that
grab one.
needs to happen. But we'll
Yeah.
wrap this up and then we'll keep going.
Okay.
What a lovely conversation we've had this evening. If you guys have any additional thoughts or gadgets or tech from the 80s that we didn't talk about tonight that you want to get out there and say, hey, man, what about this? Comment on it. Wherever you get your podcasts, hit us up on the website. We want to be a part of your conversation, and more importantly, we want you to be a part of our conversations.
I'll tell you, the best 100% way to ensure that we see that comment is to go to the website and use the contact form
There you go.
and put it there. We don't always get to see them. Depending on the podcast platform, we don't get notified sometimes when there's comments there. So the best way is always to go to the
We
website.
should all assign ourselves like a particular platform to monitor so that it's always getting attention.
Yeah, there's software for that.
All right.
I just gotta pony up.
Here I was trying to
Get the
be all
software.
considerate and shit.
I'm just saying we don't have to do that.
Well-
we can be lazy. Thanks to the 80s and all the wonderful technology that came out of it.
That's right.
We now have software that automatically does that for us.
Way to tie it off in a nice, neat little bow, my friend.
Also, reminder on the like and share thing on the post. We're going to put that
yeah.
post on
So
Instagram.
we are. Go ahead.
Well, we'll put that post on Instagram. So watch our Instagram page, Nerd Herfers. If you're not already there, please follow us. And we'll put that post in there. Like that post. Share it to your friends. And when we hit that magic number, we will select a winner and point you to our merch website and say, pick something you want.
Pick something you like. That's what we're all about. Thank you guys so much for joining us on this episode of Nerd Herfers. We hope that you enjoyed it. We certainly did. So we'll be back again soon. We're probably going to keep going tonight because there's still some scotch left in that bottle and we all have extra cigars. But that is the end of this 80s Tech episode. Thanks for tuning in. On behalf of myself, Larry Brantley, Micah Donahoe, and Brent Williams, we very much appreciate you being a part of all of this. Good night, everybody. And Micah says,
Live long and prosper.
thank you so much. And by the way, Brent, you need a sign off.
Well, I was about to point out that not once tonight did we say, put your shirt back on.
Well, now that we've got that fit in.
So there you go. I'm
Yeah.
done. That's my sign off.
So, by the way, none of us are wearing a
Live
shirt
long
right
and
now.
prosper.
So
Live
we're
long
all
and
going to
prosper.
put our shirts back
and
on.
put your shirt back on.
And call it a night. Thank you guys so much. We will see you next time on the next episode of Nerd Herfers. Here comes the outro music.
This has been a production of Nerd Herfers, copyright 2024, all rights reserved. No portion, and I do mean no portion of this broadcast may be used without permission. Please visit nerdherfers.com for more information and full legal disclaimer, you nerd.